Good morning, afternoon, evening. Happy 2025, everybody. Welcome to Soul Coffee. And if this is your first time, it is an honor, and I'm so glad to have you. I'm your host, Dr. Jamal Fruster, where the last several years I've had the honor and privilege to be able to serve thousands of healthcare professionals physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, through coaching, through training, through chiropractic work, through facilitation. And with this episode, I am so excited to bring on my brother, Dr. Keith, as I'm really excited, as of course, this is for the exhausted healthcare professional, human. And I think with Keith and all that he brings to the table, of course, with network spinal analysis, as he's another chiropractor that brings a unique and potent technique that I think is often misunderstood. But the premise of this episode is how to get your cup overflowing for 2025, understanding what does it mean to be energetically rich? What does it look like to be energetically depleted and neutral? What are some tools and things that you can do to bring more awareness in your questions, in your lifestyle, in your habits, to be able to move from one stage and one phase of healing to the other? And what can you do now? As I think you're going to be able to find some good resonance in his story and how he discovered network, which is a lighter approach that is so grounded and principled and so encompassing in things as well too. So I'm excited. Without further ado, please welcome to the show, Dr. Keith McLaughlin. What's up, baby?
I'm feeling insanely energized right now. I can't contain myself right
Oh,
now.
I love it.
I'm literally vibrating my body. I'm like, what am I gonna do with all this energy? I'm like,
we shot this person.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Man, I think before we share a little bit more of your story, brother, I'd love, as we've had so many conversations the last few years. Fun fact, Keith's my grand little in the fraternity, as one of my little brothers is Dr. John Caruso, Brother Bear, and I think very appropriately Dr. Keith is named Brother What as well too. And I think when it comes to a lot of our conversations, I'd love to just know and dive in. Oh, God, there's so many questions. But for you and what you've seen in your care and what you've appreciated, what have you seen to be one of the most powerful aspects with network spinal care and helping people go from an exhausted state to a more potent and powerful state?
That one's really, it feels like I'm gonna reference another teacher mentor I had, he was referencing something, but it's like chasing the tail of God. Like there's something so freaking magical, and it's the thing I wait for in my practice. I'm like, oh, I want to see that thing. And it's the excitement that really draws me into practice every day. And it's these moments when people transform, and not just oh, their pain's better. Oh, their headache's gone away. Oh, they're healthier. It feels like it pales in comparison to this type of experience. It's when somebody deep down to their core, psychologically, physically, emotionally, spiritually, their whole entire thing from top to bottom shifts. And it's they show up differently. My first thought is one client, and this is one of my favorite stories. I've been working with them for a while, and I told them to go do breath work at home, and they come back and they look at me and they said, well, I did the breath work at home, and they've been dealing with low back pain for a while, and then they're like, well, it's gone, and I don't think I fully processed the miscarriages I had 10 years ago. I had no idea about this, right? They'd never even spoken it to me, and they said, I thought I had to do it all on my own, and they realized I don't need to. I put it on myself, and I didn't enlist my husband to be a part of that process of emotionally being here with me. And this person was Asian, and typically in Asian culture, there's a lot of reduction of emotion.
Yeah.
And I said, go talk to your husband. Go enlist his help. Go be with him and enlist him to be a part of this process with you. And they said that the second that they realized that, their pain went away. And so to me, I was like, cool, low back pain's gone. What I was really excited about is they just broke a generational pattern. A pattern of ancestrally reducing emotion and thinking they have to deal with everything on their own. And they just rewired neurologically and down to their core that I can enlist my partner for help. And more importantly, I can enlist other people for help emotionally. I don't have to be alone.
Yeah.
I don't have to be alone in this. And I didn't even tell them that.
Yeah.
I didn't say, hey, I told them hey, you should go tell your husband, but they figured that out on their own because I give them the tools to be with their body and be with the wisdom of their body. So I get excited when that stuff happens, when somebody comes back and they're like, oh my God, I understand why this is in my life. I understand why the universe is doing this to me. I understand why God's doing this to me. This is on me. This was me who did this. I put myself in this position. And they come back and they claim more for themselves.
Oh.
And when they switch out of victim, out of energy neutral, out of what society have to tell me, and they step into something more. And that's like when I'm like I'm getting like, how can I get more energized than the start of this episode? I'm like getting even more energized. I'm like, yes, this is the thing I fucking wake up for every single day. It's like, this is the thing. Like seeing people absolutely fucking transform who they are from their core, from their soul, and seeing it just fucking pour right through to the point where there's nothing stopping. It's like a goddamn dam breaking through. And like the idea of the back pain or improvement, or it's like so little impaling in comparison to this thing. And you know, this is why I've chosen this as my like life pursuit. This is my practice, because it's like this thing's so fucking huge. When I see this happen to people, it's like, gosh, what the hell else is there to actually put your energy into? Because I've seen it so many times. You know, when I had my God damn, it's so quick. Okay, really, just at the start of the episode. When I had my fucking roommate come to me and say, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. Like, that was an intense moment for me, of realizing, like, my work to study and my work to put my effort in is not just the thing that kept him from committing suicide. It was the fucking thing that made him learn that he was worth it enough to have a partner in life, worth it enough to have, like, a girlfriend, worth it enough to have, like, pursue a career, worth it to be something so much more. And knowing that, like, just because of my work or what I've done and been able to know and, like, study for hours studying for fucking hours on shit that I didn't know if it was going to help somebody or not. And, like, actually see that happen, and then see that this person is not just, like, waking up every day being like, I don't know if I want to be here anymore. And now they're waking up every day being like, I have a fucking purpose to be here and fucking something to work forward towards. Like, that's the thing I wake up for. Like, that's the fucking thing. So, yes, like, when I see that shit happen, like, it's so worth it. Like, that's the thing. And is it happening 24/7? No, I'm still at the start of my career. And, like, I'm going to keep working towards that to make that almost all the time. I want every single person in my office to experience that, you know?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Hope y'all in your feels, man. So, spinal cord. Here's the organ of emotion.
Yes.
I think you're hitting on such a beautiful potent point, and you know, the intersection of what we both love to do. As Dr. Keith's practice is called Limitless Chiropractic, and as you could tell just from that quick story, one of his stories, chiropractic is about the expression of intelligence through matter, and that's such his life. And when it comes to so many people that I think repress their emotions culturally, professionally, I know a lot of healthcare professionals, they don't have the space, or they perceive themselves to not have the space or the tools or the capacity or the awareness to process these big emotions. I think one of my favorite things that you said when we were smacking some coffee at Tucson Coffee Roasters was the most important thing and selfless thing that one can do is to be selfish.
Yeah.
And I talked about this with Dr. Kate Jones in the past on a previous Soul Coffee episode. And I talked about when it comes to providing for the provider, I was like, you are the sun. You are the sun. If the sun were to go out, everything that the sun's helping give more energy towards would go out, such as providers and the space that they hold in their partners, in their relationships, and for themselves. So would you care to go a little bit deeper on prioritizing your well-being to serve others better?
Yeah. So I think being selfless is an attunement to societal norms. Like, oh, look at me, I'm a good person, I'm being selfless. Like, you know, like, it's a stepping into that, and it's actually like a dropping in and trying to fit in type of thing. And so we're often like, this is what I've seen, and this is just a personal opinion, it's like, it's often that we're scared to be selfish. But when you actually look at it, if I can trust that you can handle yourself and you can process yourself and be with yourself, I don't have to worry about you, right? If we keep trying to, like, worry about others, right? Nobody knows what's going on internally with us. We don't know what's going on with us, right? And so what happens is, like, situationally, let's say, you know, you're constantly trying to help me or cater to me, but then you're dropping yourself in the process. And then so what happens is you develop, like, resentment towards me, right? You're like, oh, I'm resenting you because I'm not getting what I want.
Non-consciously.
And then you all of a sudden burst out in anger, like, why aren't you doing this? And I'm like, I didn't know. I didn't know that you were hurting. I didn't know what you wanted. And so instead being in the moment and just being like, I want this. And it does take more energy getting used to the feeling of like, oh, you can't provide that right now? Okay, here's a secondary option. Here's a tertiary option. Here's the third door option, right? Here's other options that maybe we can meet halfway and figure this out. But it's like, I have a need and I want, and you don't have to fulfill it, but this is what I want, and being open about it. And I often find this is where people don't develop resentment because they're actually exposing themselves right off the bat. They're revealing where they're at, right? And so just the revealment, and like it's a process. Like I'm still getting used to getting like rejected in that realm of being like, ooh, actually I really want this right now, type of thing. But that's the act of selfishness that we don't realize is like the positive effects of being selfish is like, now I know where you're at, I can attune to you and kind of work. Even if the answer's no, at least we can kind of find an in between to make things work where I get what I want and you get what you want. But if I never know what you want, I can't help you, right? And so it's often we default to being selfless because it's like it's the right thing to do, or you're a better person because of it. And ooh, I don't want to look, worse in front of my other, right? It's a maintaining of energy neutral. We're trying to like attune to societal norms to try to protect ourselves, be safe, maintain survival, right? But actually, a way to more energetic richness is through being selfish and being like, this is what I want. And there's a balance to that. Like, I don't really have a concept of like good and evil to their extremes. I really think it's like all relative in its nature. I do definitely agree with Einstein, like it's all relative. And so, especially when looking at this type of stuff, that's really, yeah.
I mean, I love the concept of energetic richness, but I also think that it's important to highlight, as you did so well, when people are energetically depleted, they don't have the energy.
Yeah.
And that's like duh. But putting like quantification to that, or like labeling that, when people don't have energy, they can't see beyond themselves. They can't, of course, be in a way that's more in alignment with what they want. They can't, or they don't have access. I think that's one thing you really put verbiage to. They don't have access to information, because if the spine is the organ of emotion,
Yeah.
and there's all these unintegrated emotions, for example, like what you shared, like your client didn't process the miscarriages. What becomes available for people, or how do they even begin to access more energy?
And there's a couple different ways. One, I would say a big component is understanding how you energetically function. That's one.
Yes.
So like understanding like your energetic blueprint. We've talked about internal, external with yourself. We've talked about try out change, all this other stuff, and it's really understanding how do you get energy. And systems are like it's kind of like as you start looking into it, it's like not nearly as complicated as you think. Like if you've ever tried to start a fire before and you light a match and you light it to like a large piece of wood, like what happens? It's like the match goes out. Why? Because there's not enough energy to make the reaction happen. This is actually like a basic chemistry idea. It's like there's something like where the reaction spontaneously happens. I mean, we can talk about like entropy or stuff like that, but like when there's enough energy, the reaction happens.
Yes.
So what happens when there's not enough energy? The reaction doesn't happen.
Yes.
Donnie Epstein, when I started like looking at this stuff, he's like the first person I've never realized he like put it in the context of psychology. And that's when it like completely twisted my brain, and I was like, I've never thought of that before. What about consciousness? If you don't have enough energy, your consciousness goes boop, boop, and you start dropping down levels. And all of a sudden there's not enough energy to go around. So the concept is instead of changing consciousness with consciousness, you need more energy in order for your consciousness to access more. And I mean that literally just like more energy available, like literally thermodynamically. And so the less energy available, your body's going to say, well, I need to preserve. So what does it do? It starts reducing access to your frontal lobe. It starts dropping down to the reptilian brain. Our brains spend a lot of energy. I think it's up to like 20% of our energy throughout the day is just dedicated just to your brain power, right? So it's a very rapid, quick way to save energy. It's just drop in a reptilian system and then just like fight or flight mode, and then we're like left or right, and it makes it a lot easier to make decisions. It's a lot more energetically efficient. The problem is when you're trying to improve your relationship in your marriage or your partnership or in your work or your business, and you need more complexity, it requires more energy. And so it's not functional for those systems. If you're on the toilet trying to take a poop, you don't need to think about the concepts of life. Like, like there's a time and place for each intelligence in the body, right? And so like, especially, right? So it's like, there is a time and place for these different intelligences and energy, and it takes more energy to be there. The thing we were just talking about of being selfish, it takes more energy to be there because you have to be willing to receive rejection. You have to be willing to stand out from the crowd. You have to be willing. That's scary. It takes more energy to be there. And long term, it's more energetically efficient. And I would argue probably healthier too, overall. And it's probably, you're going to feel a lot better. It's much more satisfying in life. And, it's not always you get rejection. Sometimes you get a yes. And more often than not, you'll get better at getting yeses or figuring out a better solution. And so you get better at that, and then it becomes much easier and more effortless over time.
Yeah. One concept, because before I'd love to hear what brought you to this way of thinking, is the concept of energetically efficient. As I think a lot of times when I'm explaining what do I do with chiropractic or how do I apply chiropractic principles or these principles of nature essentially, is helping that energetic efficiency, where when it comes to nervous system regulation or nervous system dysregulation, it is when your brain that is autonomically functioning is inappropriately distributing energy in the body for inappropriate response,
Got
aka
it. Yeah.
you're taking a dump, but you're in fight or flight,
Yeah.
and your body's like, "Ah!" And that's just not necessary. And when we can be bombarded with so much stimuli, so much, I think trauma's thrown around a lot, but for me, it's like, trauma is just a distorted sense of what may have happened. Then it gets stored in the body, stored in the nervous system, and now it's being carried from the past into the present, which is then distorting our future. How, when it comes to the concept of compounding efficiency in life expression and striving for more appropriate energetic distribution,
Yeah.
what's a strategy that you have found to be important in getting to that point in life?
So the first thought that comes to mind is coherence. Reminds, I think actually Tori Rosen talks about this. How you do one thing is how you do all things.
Yes.
And so turning information to like a constellation instead of solidified information. Like sometimes when people, they're like, oh, look, I did this thing in my business and this improved. I did this thing in my relationship and this improved. But nobody thought about, oh, this way I improved myself in my relationship is also kind of how I do it in business. And it's also kind of how I do it in my friendships. And it's also kind of how I learned how to do this in my family. So I think a huge leap in, and I think this is why I've stood out in front of the crowd in regards to like learning efficiency and like how fast I learned things when I was younger, is because the way I handle information is very different. And this is more of a personal thing, like a little bit out of the professional realm, but like it's relative. Is like I started perceiving, okay, here's this thing, this information, this learned point, and I broke it down to its first principle, and then I applied it, and I said, okay, how does this apply to all the other areas of my life? And what happened was this one piece of information that seemed to only serve one purpose started serving 10 different purposes. And so it really simplified and isolated the information of like how I was functioning, right? Because it made it more, simplified the system, made it more accessible, right? And so this constant process of like rethinking how you're doing things and keep changing your perspective. I mean, I think one of the greatest things in life is just new perspectives, right? And we've talked about this multiple times before. It's like, how do you help an alcoholic that doesn't know they're an alcoholic?
Right.
You can't. Right. And so the first step to everything, it kind of feels funny every time I say this because it's like the key is awareness. And I always feel cheesy saying that because it feels like some like cliche, like redundant thing that keeps being said. But it's like these old monk stories and all this type of stuff. Like they got it right. Like you got to be aware of the thing because unless you're aware of the thing, like life doesn't move forward. And so I would say bringing in awareness and then connecting information, finding connections. Right. And I'm describing it as if it was like internal right now, but that also goes from an external perspective. If I find new information and I'm like, hey, Jamal, did you know about this thing? And you're like, whoa. And then you pass something back. You're like, hey, did you know about this thing? And we find more coherence, not just internally with my own psyche, but more coherence communally. Right. I find more coherence in like, oh, that's what you're talking about. And I bring information, you bring information, and we start connecting our own information interpersonally. And so what we see is now the system efficiency is not all dependent on one person.
I see like new neurons are firing. It's like
Yeah.
I'm a little neuron like
Yeah, that's
and you're
exactly it.
going,
Yeah.
but that's
Yeah.
just that's a macro of the micro. So now they fire together and they wire together. Now that there's a new thought that's more so available per se that we can both tap into.
Yeah.
How would you define coherence if that's new for people?
I would say I'd love to sit on that question more. Right off the bat, like my gut, like tongue in cheek, would be synchronization of information. So like syncing up, like, oh, we're on the same page, right? Now we're coherent, right? We're on the same page. There's clarity between us of what is going on. And you can take that to a point where that's like almost like, it feels magical, I'll tell you that for sure. When it happens conversationally, where it's like, I get you. And I'm sure I can't recall any, but I'm sure we've had moments like that where it's like, whew, like you understand where I'm at. And there's like relief. If people don't feel alone in what they're doing with, they're like, oh, somebody else gets me and gets what we're doing, right?
That part, as I've been doing a lot of onboarding calls for the school community for Provide for the Provider, and the one thing that keeps coming up is that people, they want to experience community, and they keep sharing, like, when it comes, what do they want to get out of it? They're just like, man, I just want to feel like I'm not alone, or I perceive that I'm not alone. And listening to Happy Pocket Full of Money for the first phase of Delt Warrior Retreat, and the 103 of our brothers that are prepping for it, there's a difference between separation and individuation. Individuation, from what I can gather, is we're all individualized parts of spirit, of God, and a lot of people are experiencing this reality just from one of their lenses to experience it and share it with other individualized pieces of the same thing, of that one love, or that one, how we are all one, which is coming from so many different studies of so many different aspects, versus separate. Like, I am separate from you, and I have my own distinct, and there's no continuity. But when you're able to have conversations, when the internal of a person can be able to have conversations, deal with the emotion, face the emotion, the unintegrated aspects and parts of themselves, now they can have more availability or coherence in things firing and working with each other and working with the life experience, versus stuffing it all away and reducing it and not acknowledging it.
Kind of. Yeah, a couple aspects. It's like I'm perceiving you of what, like, the words that come to mind is like an integrated ego. And I think this is something that's like not
Interesting.
talked about a lot often, which is like the ego is on the side of the rest of the psyche. And that's like your ego is always going to like reduce and try to like, try to keep it to yourself. You're like, how can I get more money for myself? How can I protect myself? How can I trust somebody else? What can I, like, that's the whole point of the ego. Is like a survival mechanism to like do the antithesis, and it binds information and energy. And it's important because that binding of energy and information is what makes you you. If nothing was bound, Jamal wouldn't exist. But like the ego allows Jamal to exist because it binds enough information, just enough to like hold you together, to be a concept in and of itself. So when I hear individualism, I think of it as like, I'm an individual and I'm connected with everybody else, versus in the case of separation, it's just like, I'm an individual and this is what I need, and
This is where it stops.
It's a giving into the ego. And so this is a slip up I've seen often, and I have a very strong opinion about this, is like the integration of the ego is very important. I'm not a big fan of like trying to fight the ego or something like that. I think the ego is a part of you. It's not going anywhere. And I think you need to figure out how to get it on your team. It's going to be that one person in the meeting always that's like has devil's advocate for everything. Like, hey, let's be a kid again and let's have fun and let's expand. And then there's that one person in the meeting, well, what about this? And what about this? And what about that? Like I always think of like my internal psyche as like a board meeting with all the board, and that one freaking guy that always has to speak up against something, to be against everybody else. But I love that part of me because it puts the reins just on enough to know like, hey, am I really sure about this? And if I am really sure, I'll push through it. And if not, there's something more to check in with. So it's actually like this beautiful aspect of ourselves that we need to respect and love, and find how to get it talking to the rest of our board members. It's typically the one talking against everybody, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Like getting that integrated. So when I think you're able to be with your ego and be like, yes, here's the selfish part of me, and here's this side of me, and like having that connecting, not but, like, and I can be in connection with everybody else. I also want to highlight something else you were pointing to, which is like, I want to clarify and make sure I'm hearing you correctly, but it sounded almost like dealing with it on your own first, and I want to make sure my context is correct, is like dealing with it on your own first, and then presenting it to the group. And I would say the order is not always important. It can be, but like I think it's also important to present it to the group first so that you can process it internally sometimes, and it depends on the person. So I don't think you were contextualizing it that way, but I just wanted to highlight that of the importance of not. You don't always have to deal with it on your own first. You don't have to like clean yourself up and then present yourself to the group. Like you can be messy and show up with the group and then come back and journal about it on your own later, and you're like, oh, this helped me clarify with somebody else.
Yeah.
And it's often that people who are external, like, get energy from outside.
Me.
Yeah, me too, right? It's often we do a lot better with others because we get our energy from around us. So when we like, I'm sitting with you and you give me a reflection, you're like, Keith, do you see you're doing this thing? I'm like, oh, I didn't realize I was doing that thing. It like often opens up a new doorway, a new gateway, versus if I journaled on my own, I might have not discovered it, type of thing. And vice versa, I might have journaled on my own and discovered it, type of thing. So it goes back and forth.
Would you say externals and internals would you equate that to that being the same thing as being introverted and extroverted?
They're very different. From my understanding, like extroverted and introverted is like how you socially get energy. Internal external is like how you get energy, like your energetic flow with the universe. So there's very drastic differences in that. Sometimes they have like a little bit of similarity, but they're very different. What are we going for?
Heard. Kage is participating in the conversation, everybody, in case you haven't figured that out, or if you're not, viewing this via video.
Right. Oh, gosh.
right on cue. And speaking of ego, as I know something that was big for you when it came to understanding network is the first time you got entrained, right? Adjusted in network language.
Yeah.
Care to share a little bit more about like how and why this became such an important and necessary thing for you to study?
Yeah. So I love reflecting on this story. So I originally went into school for BEST, which was another low force technique, light touch, all this type of stuff. And I was like, this is what I'm doing. I went to chiropractic school. And then, of course, the universe was like, no, actually, you got more than that. You can do something else. And so I'm meeting some other colleagues that are a little further along in school. And they're like, hey, you should come out to Network Club. It's kind of similar to BEST. I was like, oh, cool. Not thinking too much about it. I was like, do. And I walk in and, they're doing light touches. And I remember hopping on the table, and the practitioner, this was at Life Unbound by Tyler. I think he's actually teaching network now, which is really cool. I'm excited to learn again from him. Anyway, so he made a contact down at my pelvis, right? And all of a sudden I just went, and it felt like if you ever like been, doing like a breath holding contest with your friends at the pool, and you're like holding your breath and come up, you're like, you take that huge breath. That's how it felt, but I wasn't underwater. And I just like started like heavy breathing, and I was just like, what is happening to me? And it felt like my lungs grew like four sizes that day, right? And one of the other practitioners was like, what are you feeling? I'm like, there's a lot of oxygen. And I was like, what was I doing before? I was like,
wow,
holy crud, I've been like not breathing. And I was so sympathetic. I was so in fight or flight that I didn't even know how much like my breathing had been reduced. And so I start breathing, and I start heading out because we were done that night for like the club, and I started getting like little shakes, and I was like, okay. And I felt like really weird in my body, like there's like something opening up. I was like very energized, and I literally went to go grab my car door handle. If you can't tell, I'm a little dyslexic. Car door handle, and I just couldn't open it. And I just had like voice pop in, just like, here, wait, like just wait. And so I decided not to drive, and I just kind of waited. One of the practitioners that invited us along too, he came out, and I barely got a word out, and I just like screamed my lungs out, and I like literally just my body just went into a process, and I literally started shaking for 2 hours straight. So I was just literally in the parking lot like 8, 9 at night, just like shaking my whole body, and I like couldn't stop shaking, and my body was just in. I come back later as like 3 or 4 years later, and I actually like understood what was happening with my body. Was I was having a somatic experience. Was my body was like had all this unprocessed emotion and trauma and all this type of stuff of like stuff I've been repressed for years. And my body was just, that was how my body was physically processing it, was through shakes. It was just like the nervous system was going through resets. And then I ended up on the ground at some point, and yeah, practitioner helped me down. But anyways, and I just had this moment where it's like I had this completely selfless experience where I just like dropped out of my body, and it felt like I just like popped into the universe for a quick second. It just felt so much love, and then it just like fell back into my body, and I was just like, it was like I just had, I don't know, taking psychedelics or something. Like it just like my brain was just like so much I just processed, or like I just like won a championship or something. Like there's so much energy exhausted, and I felt like on the top of my game, and I felt like really tired, and I was like, what is going on? And I was just like wiped out. And it left one question with me when I left, which was like, what is network? And then I just vehemently started pursuing this stuff, and every step of the way, the more I learned, the more I was like, this is the thing I need to go after. And I had a lot of fight with myself, like, is this really what it is? Like, I'm just, poking people's butts, and like, this is what I do, type of thing. And like,
Logan?
yeah, I know, right? And it's like, the more I did this though, like, the more I kept understanding the bigger picture of what was going on here. And it was like somebody had figured out the secrets to how the human operating system works, even to a deeper degree than we've even seen, like the deepest degree we've ever seen in chiropractic. And I was like enamored by it. And most importantly, I understood it. And that was not common across like network practitioners. I got what he was saying when I would listen to Donnie Epstein. People would listen to him and be like, I don't get him. He's way above my head. And I would listen to him and I'm like I would not understand a little bit, but I'd be like, yeah, I get what he's saying. He's saying like this is the big picture. And so there's something even a deeper calling where I was like, I'm like, this is an attunement with me. This is like, I get this stuff. And like, I have the gift to learn this like really well. I think anybody can learn network, but there's a certain type that is gifted to like deeply understand what network is at its core. And it's, to me, it's a human development, but it's also human discovery of systems in the nervous system that has been here for ages. And I'm willing to argue it might be one of the greatest human discoveries we've ever made. Oh, hello. Yeah.
Man, if you had the opportunity to declare to the world what is network, as I think that it's on Goop, I think that it's on Netflix. I think that it's a lot of different things, and people might see what it looks like, and they might judge it. They might see someone moving on the table. They might see a lot of different things.
Yeah.
But for you, if you had the opportunity to declare to the world, what is network spinal care, what would you say?
It's an update to the human iOS operating system. Donnie Epstein talks about this all the time, and I think that's such a great line to use. It's taking your nervous system and it's saying it's time for the iOS update 5.369 or whatever it is. And we clear out the old stuff and new stuff comes in. A lot of people get caught up in the aesthetics of it, and you got to understand the reason people freak out over it is because they've never seen a human system really do its work.
Ooh,
and
that's
it processing. That's what the human system looks like. Have you ever seen a fish move? Have you ever seen a snake move? Have you watched the spine of a wolf before? Like, what does it do? It has this like oscillation to it. And so people see humans doing it without their like ego reducing the movement, and all of a sudden they see this wave and they're like, oh my God, type of thing. And it's like, no, this is actually nature happening right now. It's not anything weird. I had a few people leave my office because they thought I worked with demons, and I'm like, no, it's actually quite the opposite. Actually, it's like we're getting you in attunement with the divine force that's like operating your body. Because your nervous system is the split between man the spiritual and man the physical. Like, that's the interface, right? And so your nervous system's like a giant, it's like the TV antennas, right? The bunny ear antennas, right? That's essentially what your nervous system is, to receive like the blueprint of reality, right? And I often will talk about like something that I feel like it's so obvious, but we don't think about often. And you can break it down to like laws of nature. And I'll use this example in my office all the time. I say, what temperature does water boil at? Like normal, pressure and all that stuff. If you're a chemist, people are always like, well, what pressure is that? Normal pressure and all that stuff. What does water boil at? And you say 212 Fahrenheit. And I said, how often does it do that? Well, every time. What's telling it to do that? Like, why is that? And we're like, well, it's the laws of nature. Okay, cool. Like, yeah, and it's like, it's kind of crazy to think about. Like, what the frick is telling water to have the same exact response every single time and have these consistent things? The reason mathematics exists around chemistry is very fact that it is consistent and reproducible. And what the heck is telling it to be consistent and reproducible, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, we're starting to talk on universal intelligence and general chiropractic principles, but like, what the heck is telling it to do that, right? And so, same exact thing, that's the intelligence we're working with here. And when the intelligence takes over, it does some funky stuff that we typically don't see in society. You don't see somebody sitting on a chair going, oh my gosh, what is happening, type of thing. But when we allow that process to come through, the body starts to kick it in.
It's good.
And sometimes it just moves. In my case, it moved because I was ready for it, and it just moved through my system. Some people's egos are so attached and bound to who they are that they can't conceive of a different reality.
It's a really good word, bound. I feel that I feel that very deeply, and I think what you just highlighted so well. I love Peter Levine's work. It's cool to look outside of chiropractic and see the laws and other applications and perspectives.
I mean, even Siddhartha talked about this, like being bound to the ego, being so attached to the ego and who you are and how this is thing. It's a movable thing. It's like a river. I mean, there's an old like Conan Taoist saying where it's like you don't step in the same river twice.
Oh,
Like it's the same
so good.
named river, but it's different water every time you step in. And we humans are the same thing. We're a part of nature too. You're never the same river twice. I might still call you Jamal, but you're a different Jamal today from you were yesterday. And even 10 minutes from now, you're going to be a different Jamal. You're constantly flowing because you're in the flow of life and you're coherent with nature, right? And the more coherent you get with nature, the more things move along, the more connection with life. What does that mean for you? Like benefit at the bottom line? You feel better, you live better, you operate better, you have more impact on the world, right? It's that simple.
All right, that's it. That's the podcast. Man, I appreciate you tying and sharing your beautiful story, as I think for me, it just makes so much sense. And like exploring chiropractic, and people ask me all the time, like, how'd you become a chiropractor? Well, I was like, oh, well, I hurt my low back. And I feel like when I first started understanding and seeing some of the giants of our time, the legends of our time, and being able to see the application of nature in a human being and understanding that, and like I was starting to say with Peter Levine's work, he's like, oh yeah, we're a human animal. And I was like, duh.
Yeah.
Like, oh, duh. Like, duh. And being able to allow movement to happen because so many people repress what's inside them or suppress and try to just confine it, or they don't allow it for it to flow through. They try, it's like trying, like you said, they're trying to dam up that which is trying to flow through them. And I think healthcare providers, I think parents, I think business owners are so good at doing that because it helped them advance so far. And I think the beautiful thing...
It's a strategy. They're all strategies.
It is.
They're all strategies for functioning. And the importance is evolving those strategies. There's nothing wrong with them, but the more you evolve them, the more you'll get, right? So these are strategies. It's like, oh, I learned that if I suppress my emotions, I can get a little further and I can survive a little better, right? But it's like, is this going to keep working for the rest of your life? Do you want to just keep suppressing your emotions? And when pain steps in, this is again, a Donnieism. I got a ton of them. I have them for days. The whole point of pain is to interrupt your life. The whole point of pain is to interrupt your life. The reason you feel that, people are like, they've been suppressing their emotion in their business for years and years and years and years, and all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, I got these terrible stomach aches. Why do I have these stomach aches?
My back hurts.
Yeah, can you fix them? Can you get rid of them? And I'm like, some part of me really wants to stare at them and say, no, I don't want to get rid of them until you understand why they're there in the first place, and you truly digest in your soul why the universe is putting you into this position, because it wants you to know something greater, because there's something greater for calling for you on the other side. And that's what I'm aiming for. So no, I don't want the pain to go away until the deeper purpose of why that pain's there in the first place exposes itself, and it opens itself like a freaking beautiful lotus flower to what the truth is behind all of this. Is the universe knows you're more than that, and it's wanting you to claim more for yourself. So it knows you have greater impact to share with the universe. I mean, why else would you be here in the physical?
Yeah, so it's like, if you can evolve your strategies, because, I think when you're a provider, you're of service. And I think it's a grand call to be of service and efforting to help people observe more reality, process reality, experience more reality, ideally get back to experiencing the flow. And I think when there's so much stimulus, and especially now, you times that by, I'll just say technology.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
the river
And
of
that's not
life.
just like digital technology too.
No, that's
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
There's so much more access,
Mm-hmm.
but there isn't the corresponding bandwidth until we learn it to process now all the more information that we're experiencing. So then people get blown out.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you're breaking down a bit of what network, and a premise that
Mm-hmm.
can come with it is that when there's too much information that is occurring in the spine or occurring,
Mm-hmm.
in the human being, that the spine can develop tension, and it's a means of slowing us down, as it's an innate
Right.
mechanism for the body to be
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, let's
Yeah.
start to process this. So
Yeah.
that way, even if we can process it later, coming from
Mm-hmm.
BGI, subluxation, or what we look for, it's not a bad thing. People, I'm gonna slay subluxation.
Yeah.
No, that's where Tulski's, and that's what gives me a grounded base. Well,
Yeah.
I'm here to help reduce the state of subluxation, which is a condition of locking the body down because things are so overwhelming, which then impacts the myology, impacts the histology, impacts
Mm-hmm.
the kinesiology, and impacts,
Mm-hmm.
so many different parts of ourselves.
Yeah. And this is like what you're talking about is like one of my biggest frustrations when I got into chiropractic school and started learning general principles, because I was like, oh, there's like this thing like body's super intelligent, and then there's like the big question mark, why does it subluxate? Why is the brain disconnect from the body in the first place? And we already have one answer, which is 24, which is limitations of matter. Like there's just like you go get hit split in half by a truck, you're not like there's a limit to how matter works. There's certain physical laws here. And the question is like, why is it not healing these things and not these things? And we have to follow the same principle. Body's intelligent. So what is it doing? It's like, and I just had this analogy come to me. I've never thought of this before, but I really like this one. Is you can think of it as like you're sucking a straw. The information is the fluid coming through. And what your nervous system doing is it's squeezing the straw because it can't handle what's coming through the straw right now. And what it does is it squeezes it or it twists it or it turns the straw because it's like, I can only handle this much right now. So let's not like put it all on my plate right now. And so it's just slowly trying to process it, and it's dealing with the best way it can with the current strategies and the amount of energy available to it at this current moment, right? And of course, when we add more energy, it says, oh, I have more energy. I can process a little bit more. So what does it do? It unkinks the straw a little bit. And it unkinks it a little bit more. And then it unkinks it a little bit more because the more energy now it's able to process this information it hasn't before. And every time is like a little baby step towards the larger stuff. And so a small thing becomes another small thing, another small thing, another small thing, and it becomes a bigger thing and a bigger thing and a bigger thing. And this was the big idea that BJ Palmer always talked about, which is like a small thing can become a big thing. He's talking about the butterfly effect ultimately. And it's like, that's what we're looking at here too. It's just the steady unkinking of this hose and the steady unkinking of the straw, allowing your body to process this. And so, I mean, this also goes for like, if you want more direct applications, like when you're moving through the process of like stepping into processing more, baby steps. It's okay to do baby steps. Like, that's okay. Like, you're human, give yourself permission to move. Yeah.
And it's so good because I think a lot of people are trying to drink the ocean through a straw now.
Yeah, they, see some self-improvement video and they're like, oh, I need to step into it and I need to dive into the ice bath, I'm like, dude, dunk your face in a cold bowl of water. Let's start there. Like, type of thing. And it's something like when we hear it, we're like, oh yeah, I know I need to do that. But we get so like enthralled and inspired and engaged when we hear these folks talk. And it's like, again, the balance between like the ego and all these parts, like being like, be gentle with yourself. Like, it's okay. Like, you're a human too. And I think giving also lifetime feedback from others helps us a lot. We always play these games on ourselves where like make assumptions. We're like I'll be around you sometimes and I'm like, Jamal's got it all together. Like, he's probably making $10 million a year and da 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 da. And like, we get into our mind and like, he probably works from like at least 3 a.m. until like 1 a.m. in the morning and he sleeps for 2 hours and he's like good to go. Like we just like blow it out of proportion, type of thing. And then we actually check in and we're like, oh, I'm actually doing a normal amount of work. Or actually, I'm doing more than enough work,
That part.
Yeah, it's like, oh my gosh, like I'm actually overworking myself right now, and
That part.
getting live feedback from other people is super healthy. We just not getting too internal.
That's so big, as I think that's a bridge to awareness.
Yeah.
Like me and you, even just when we connected. I mean, there's been, our relationship's been so good to just develop over the years. And, sometimes one of us can like hold a certain story of what the other one might be thinking. And I think that's where stories can come in because that's also a defense mechanism, or that's something that people can tell themselves, because it then may bring them more peace, because I think that's a part of the brain
It's
being
the
like,
ego
hey,
in the boardroom.
I'm losing, or I don't have a complete awareness of this, so let me try and
Yeah.
bridge this information, because then if I know this and this is what I'm familiar with. And I was talking to John, my roommate, about this, and I got my other roommate, back in the day, got Lou in this. This is so good. I was talking to John, so many people can try to just bridge awareness, or they make stories and they make assumptions. Then we get addicted to these emotional states, because then that will then lead to more safety and then more trust in this part of reality that I'm experiencing.
And you just like hit it right on there. It's the safety. When we are energy neutral, when we're in tier 1 consciousness, it's all about preservation of energy. It's safe to do this. It's safer to know with the devil you know, right? This is like a common saying. It's like it's better the devil you know. And it's like that energy is because you are too scared to make a risk. More importantly, you want to preserve your energy, because risk taking is energy rich, baby. Like that's where it's at. Like risk taking is where it's like,
It's good.
I'm gonna, like I had a good friend of mine, I absolutely love him, and he played saxophone, and in high school he like ripped off his shirt and like hopped onto the cafeteria table and started doing the sax guy, like with the saxophone. Like that's energy rich. Like he doesn't care societally. He doesn't care if he gets in trouble, because he knows there's more fun to be had and there's more human experience to be had, and he steps into it fearlessly. That's energy rich. There's no way humanly possible that he was not energy rich in that moment, because he was breaking societal norms. He was breaking what was known. And so it's like energy neutral is about maintaining preservation of energy, and it's about maintaining neutral. And so we know this as practitioners, because we have folks come in and they say, well, I've been having back pain for years, and the doctors say that I'm just going to be having this for life, and I just want to manage it. Right? And nobody's ever told them, I said, what if you perceived a reality so great that you actually didn't have to live with your back pain anymore? And nobody's like offered them even the potential of that happening, because what's happening with the doc? The doc is too scared to give him hope and the risk.
Because the doc may be energetically compromised, or neutral, or energetically oh, fuck.
Because what is it? It's a coherent system. We're all part of the system. See, like as a practitioner, I don't look at the client. I look at the client in relation to me, because it's all relational. Einstein talked about this. Everything's relative. Everything's relative. We know this from physics. This is like kind of the pervading physics concept, is everything's relative, but nobody's brought it to the concept of everything, not just the realm of physics and quantum physics. Like everything is relative, right? So what does that mean? When you get in connection with another person, you change in relation with them, right? And even the old Taoists knew about this. They talked about like, you are nothing without the other thing. Tall is nothing without short. I mean, I'm sure we got some Alan Watts fans out there. I'm definitely one of them. Yeah. I was like all I ate and breathed in high school.
In high school?
Yeah, maybe. I was so blessed to get that so soon.
Oh my God.
I'm not a hippie. I'm like, oh yeah, no, I was totally a hippie kid in high school. So it's like, but anyways, I was talking about this left and right, this yin and yang philosophy of you can't have one without the other. You can't have up without down, because they're comparative, they're relative. This has been known by Taoists for years. They were talking about the same concept, but now we're coming in with like deeper science behind it, and we're like, yeah, it is. They just had it more from a philosophical perspective as a scientific perspective, and we're just in that age of science right now. But it's like, it's relative there too. So when I get in connection with a client, I'm paying attention to my own thoughts, because it's going to tell me what they're thinking. And that might sound really weird, but like, you'd be surprised how often it happens, because someone comes in the office, and I'm typically not very prejudiced, I'm not very mean, but I'll have somebody come in that's overweight, and I start judging them for being overweight. I'm like, where are these thoughts coming from? And you know why? Because they're judging themselves for being overweight. And they're energetically calling that in, they're attracting it in. And so the second they step in, they're attracting this, like wanting me to tell them that they're a POS, and like, they need to get their act together. It's attracting that energy. And it's because it's the natural state of the universe, is the universe wants to be energetically, that information wants to get acknowledged. And so it's attracting it in. And so the universe is putting them and attracting them in the situation, and attracting people to make them, until they become aware and acknowledge the thing that they need to acknowledge of their experience. And really the experience deeper than that, if we're using that same example, it's even deeper than just they need to acknowledge that they're overweight, and that, no, they need to acknowledge they have a self-image relational thing. That's the deeper layer. They have a relational aspect of themselves where they don't think they're worth enough to put that amount of energy into. And that's probably what's the deeper layer going on. And that's probably the thing they need to acknowledge. I don't know if that is. It might be something completely different, but there's typically a deeper layer that hasn't been acknowledged or they're not aware of. And I might sit in a room and talk with them for 3 hours and I might still not figure it out. Even if I just keep asking them questions, that might not ever happen because it might be buried so deep that we can't really reach it. And that's why I opt for the energetic way, because what happens is when we shift the energy, they become aware of it instantaneously, right? Just like that match to the wood, when there's enough energy, wood lights on fire.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of me sitting here trying to figure out their consciousness and we just provide the energy and they figure it out for us and the body already knows what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And we start trusting nature to do what it was always designed to do. Nature is always
already doing.
It's already doing.
Yeah.
It really is.
And I love the application once more, that book, Happy Pocket Full of Money, highly recommend the book. Oh my God. At first, I did not like the book. I was like, why the fuck did Grant bring this in? And then it got to the chapters on quantum physics and thoughts and how the mind or how the body is an external representation of the mind. And that was one that was like,
Yeah.
And then your external environment is a reflection of your internal environment. I was like, oh right, Dispenza. And then it just took me on a rabbit hole of different things. I was like, oh man, I'm so glad that I could experience this book.
Yeah. And it comes back to that yin and yang principle. The internal is the external. They're both the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
They're creating each other
There's no
simultaneously.
There's no separation.
If you separate one, the other one won't exist. So
it also, one thing that Dr. Keith hit just now as well too, I think is really potent, is the principle of cause and effect. And in the book, it just reminds us that the cause is the thought. The cause is the emotion that can attribute to the thought. Excuse me. And when we can understand the energy, now we can impact the now effects, which could be the matter and the status of the matter, aka the body, and or our reality in whatever shape or form that may look like, the habits, the behaviors, as those can be non-conscious processes and that are there and that are present 99% of the time, that then are in the background running things. And until we bring it to the forefront, well, then we may not ever be aware of it.
So back up a little bit, and I want to highlight, because I want to make sure I don't miss this. You're saying like this is stemming, like the cause is the thoughts. Is that what you're saying this stems from?
Cause can be the energy, as I humbly think the energy can then attribute and influence the thoughts.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to highlight there, which is like something that's missed, where it's like we've been in this age of like trying to change consciousness with consciousness. We're like trying to fight fire with fire type of thing, and it's like sometimes it works, and in this case, like this is, and I'm not saying this is like the key to everything, but like this is the view that I take personally, and this is my opinion, is like that energy is really important because your energy determines your thoughts. And let me tell you, when I first got this, I was like, I don't know if I'm with that. Yeah, I'm like, that kind of sounds strange. And then I started seeing it in my office. I started seeing it with myself, where I would just breathe. I would do this thing. And all of a sudden I went from, oh my gosh, I hate myself. Oh my gosh, I'm a victim. Oh, I'm terrible for doing this. All of a sudden to my day's doing great. And I was like, what just happened? I was like, 2 seconds ago, everything was terrible. And now everything's great. What happened? And I realized that it wasn't a process of needing like processing or time, or it was instantaneous. It was like over a second. And I was like, that was magical. Why was that magic? I'm like, and that's like this obsessive compulsive aspect of me of like obsessing and trying to pursue this so deeply, is like, I want to know and get that magic because I want other people to experience that magic. Like that's, I want to see that transition where they're like, I hate my mom. My mom's the cause of my reality. My childhood is why I did this. Because of my childhood, now I'm able to do this, and now I'm great, and now I'm helping humanity because of my child. It was like, whoa, those are two different stories. What just happened? What shifted? Right? And like that's the magic part that I'm always like, I want to see what's going on there.
Oh, it's so good. It just makes me think perception shifted, but what shifted perception? Potentially energy, which then shifted perception, which then led to things.
More energy, more perspectives.
And you can hold
perspectives. Yeah, and that's a really important part.
More perspectives, which came up with Dr. Danielle, the ability to hold polarity. Dr. Danielle.
And it does take more energy, but if you become more energetically efficient, it will feel really effortless, actually.
This is really good.
This is the point of chiropractic. This is the point of network. This is how I've been phrasing it oftentimes, and I've been liking this one. It updates your hardware so it can handle the software of consciousness. Right? How
would you define consciousness?
Literally self-awareness. Like literally just information recognizing information.
Mm.
It's literally like this right here.
It's like a kage or a cat sitting in Keith's lap.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So like we're recognizing a cat right now. Like there's information recognizing like information, right? And that comes more complex when it recognizes its own information, right? Like now I'm recognizing, oh, I'm a Keith with this bound information, and I'm this person, and this is like, oh, this is what makes me up, and I like pasta on occasion, you know, and I like to do fasting and cold baths, and I'm Keith the chiropractor, right? And there's like
I'm
this
a chiropractor.
Yeah, I'm a chiropractor. What's the wolf thing? I'm a
Look
human.
at me, I'm a human. I'm depressed. I'm behind on my chores. I pay taxes.
Yeah.
Hey, look at me. I'm a chiropractor. I have facility consciousness.
Yeah, right. And so it's like we're so like, and there's like it's so important, but it's gosh, I love laughing about that stuff.
It's necessary.
But yeah, oh my gosh, yes, yeah.
Yeah, don't take yourself too damn seriously. One thing that I didn't want to lose, Dr. Keith talked about the importance of knowing your energetic blueprint, which is where I had studied human design, which is a combination of quantum physics, the Kabbalion's principles, the chakra networks, the I Ching, and then astrology. But then also, Keith introduced me to a triad that NSA applies, of course, of internal or sourcing your energy internally or sourcing your energy externally, which is very important, different from extrovert and introvert, which is then a part of understanding these aspects, which is structure, behavior, and perception, where I want him to go deeper in it. But one thing that was big for me as of recent was like, he was like, double down, as everyone has a prime of these three. And he's like, double down on your behavior, what you're doing, because that's going to help you move through life.
And more like, I want to ask the question, how's that been going for you?
Oh, it's been going amazingly. Like,
yeah, what's different?
I'm not worried much about the perception or trying to like move through all the emotions or like the thoughts of it, because that's where it can get caught up for me, which makes sense for me too, because I have an open mind, gate or open mind channel when it comes to human design, which I'm prone to quote unquote overthinking, getting lost in that. So instead, just doing what needs to be done has led to so much shift, and it's been so nurturing.
Seems like a doer. Yeah, so it's like the core of what we're talking about here is like get more energy and not, or sorry, let me rephrase that. Not get more energy, find more energetic efficiency. More energy is not necessarily better, right? If I'm in a company, right, and I'm growing a company to like, let's say 10 million, $25 million, that's more energy, but does that mean the company's better off? Some of them are ready for bankruptcy and they're at $25 million in revenue. Just because they have more energy doesn't mean they're doing better off. But more energetic efficiency, because then companies talk about margin, to me that's like showing energetic efficiency because they're effectively running the company, right?
Yes. I also think that it's important, as with network, there's different contacts as well too. Just like with chiropractic, there's different spaces and different timing for different contacts. And I think that it's important to be able to get specific in what point in your life do you need to contact or shift for the body to make the most potency and shift and reorganization.
Yeah, and there's a timing to these things too. You know, I'm sure like some people will listen to this and they're gonna be like, oh my God, this is the perfect time I'm hearing this. Like there's a timing to things too, and timing how the universe operates. So the major overall concept is more energetic efficiency. Find where you get, because the more energetically efficient, the less energy it takes to achieve the same goal, right?
Yes.
And so that way you do have access to more energy through efficiency. You're becoming more effective, right? And the nervous system already has the program designed to do that. That's what I work with. Like there's already a program in there to update it and constantly work it better. The systems that Donnie really built out was like, these are systems to basically help you understand and get your blueprint down. All right. And it's like, understand, how do you get energy specifically and where are you at in your journey? Right. And so internal external is one of these, like two of these ways. And you can look more into this. Epienergetics does like free rotating things on this. So like you can literally go listen to Donnie talk about it. It's accessible. And external is when we get energy from coming from outside in. It typically comes from the future. It comes from around us, right? When we started this, I literally had my hands up. Why? Because I'm an external. I get energy from way out here. Like basking in the universe, being like bigger than myself, perceiving myself from outside, looking to the future, seeing what's in my future, what is already happening. Like for me, it's not good to be like, if I went into this podcast and was like, you know, oh, look at all these great things I did, 5 years ago, and this is why I should come on, right? I mean, you can even hear my language started shifting there immediately. It's like, this is why I should come on, right? I became really like individualized in that moment where it's like, type of thing. Versus I'm like, this is the amount of people this is going to impact in the future. Like, this is the bigger purpose here. And this is like somebody's language will literally shift when you start talking future past. So external is more future focused. We get energy from outside. Even my hands are facing away from my body. We get energy from outside. Internals are the opposite. So then they place their hands on their body. They check in with what they know, their victories, their certainty. They're like, this is what I stand for. This is where I'm at. This is who I am, right? And so if externals go to the past, they'll just try to fix stuff forever. If internals go to the future, they'll typically be so anxious they can't even like, that's scary.
And I feel that deeply because if I reflect on the past or what I did or was that the right thing or blah, 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 that's going to quickest way to, and I'm going to, oh God, help please.
Do you want to play a game of it real quick? Just
sure, why not?
Show people. Okay.
We'll do that and we'll start to tie a bow to this combo.
Yeah. Pick a category of like what you want to focus on. Anything. Okay. Health and wellness, right? Where was your health and wellness 5 years ago? And just whatever comes to mind.
5 years ago, how old was I? I was 26. Oh man, it was not in its best shape.
Okay.
Grad school didn't have systems in place, skinny but also fat, depressed. Like it wasn't good.
Yeah. Anything else you want to share about it? And I want you to notice as Jamal's talking, notice what energy is he bringing to what he's saying, and what is it about? Is it about himself? Is it about other people? Is it like what's the energy around it?
Which is very compressive.
Yeah.
Smacking PB&Js. Skin wasn't in a good place, getting worse.
And what I'm hearing when I hear you is like, I was just trying to get through.
Totally.
That's what I'm hearing right now. I was just trying to make it through. What's Jamal's health 5 years from now?
Oh man.
Wait, right there. Dude, he didn't even say anything. Do you see how his face changed? He's like, oh man, you should see this dude. He's like, you don't want to fight this guy, right?
That boy's thick.
Yeah, right?
That
like,
gut's healthy.
Like even the energy in the room just changed. Just us talking about it differently. Like it's like it shifts for us.
Great example, bro.
And so like it immediately, and you can do this with anything, and it's not hard to figure out. Do this in home. More importantly, say it out loud too. You want to hear yourself. It's a biofeedback mechanism. Hear yourself saying like, oh,
it's a biofeedback mechanism.
Right?
Fuck.
It's biofeedback.
It's available. It's available.
Yeah, you just talk about whatever you're experiencing. And that's the thing I see most people missing is they're like, oh yeah, I'm suicidal, I feel like crap and all this stuff, but they never said it out loud. And I say this because I had my own personal experience of this, is I was about to teach my first breath workshop and I was feeling like dog shit. And I was like well, if this breath work really works, I'm going to try it out. And sure enough, I lay on my in my bedroom and I go to stage 1, which is suffering, and I start breathing in, and it's time to acknowledge whatever's going on with me, and I'm like, I want to kill myself right now. And I was like, oh God. I was like, holy shit. And I just started crying for like 5 minutes, and I got up and I was like, everything's okay. It was like, but it was like I felt like crud up to that point, and that's when it like hit me like a freaking rock how important the breath work is, but more importantly how important the 12 stages is understanding like in that moment I needed to acknowledge what was real for me, and what was real for me, and it was genuine down to my soul, is I wanted to end my life in that moment. And the second I acknowledged that, the energy moved. And then I expanded and I got a little bit more access to more, right? Something shifted in me, started opening up, right? And just stepping back and acknowledging that thing. So when we say stuff out loud, it has impact. That's why it's important when you do this exercise, it's like, say it freaking out loud. Hear yourself saying it. I had one client come in and we did this thing, and I was like, and they're like, well, I'm struggling with addiction. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, they're particularly like, well, I'm struggling with porn, like porn usage and all that stuff. I was like, okay. I was like, place your hands. What do you say? And it's like, I'm disappointed. I'm a POS. Like, it's like all these stories about like how terrible of a human being they are. And it's like, okay, open up your hands. What are you doing in the future? I'm going to get over this. I'm going to be better for my partner. It's not a problem. And I was like, are you noticing the difference? It was funny because they're like, no, not so much. And I was like, oh gosh, okay, we got more work to do here. But I was like,
look in the mirror and say it again.
Yeah, exactly, right? But it's like, look at the difference. It became, look how terrible of a human being I am, to like, I'm already done with this. I'm already over this. And that was because they were external in that context. So future was huge for them. The second they stepped into this power, it was like, I know who I am. It's like, or it's freaking like a main line to their soul, right? Yeah, you having a good time too?
Kage agrees with that.
Yeah, baby.
One thing that I'd love to tie the conversation on was the lesson of the week, actually, when I was coming back from, the holidays. As, it's important to, just be vulnerable and real with y'all. It's like, holidays weren't, the last 8 years are fucking hard as well for me too. Like, family wasn't where I was where I wanted it to be. Me and my sister, me and my sibling, we weren't, talking. We were still estranged. And, this last Christmas, we got to take a family photo for the first time and in years. And that shit felt so, so good to be able to be in a place to just have my family all together. And I think it's important as a philosophy for me is to look the beast in the eye.
Yeah.
And in the past, I've said lean the fuck in. And that can show up with a lot of different philosophies and whatever it can look like. But I think network embraces, the importance of engaging that. So what Dr. Keith was hitting on was the 12 phases of healing. When the first one is suffering, and I think a part of it is acknowledgement, and that's the first step, and be able to start to hit that home. One thought with that is in being able to look the beast in the eye, and I was reflecting this to him. He also visualized this like crossover point, as a lot of people can overindulge in that.
Yeah.
And then that can become their now new addiction into, I always look at the beast, or I'm always suffering, I'm always XYZ.
So this is like the transition between, like, this is the 12 stages, like the seasons, which is discover, transform, awaken. And I'm going to overlay what you just said with the seasons. So discover is like looking the beast at the eye, like, there's a beast over there. Fuck. And it's like growling at you and everything. And in transform, you learn to tame the beast, right? And that's when people can get wrapped up in like using it as a badge of honor. Like, I tamed the beast. I overcame the beast. Look at me.
I was burnt out, or I'm burnt out.
Look at me. Look how great I am. But they miss the continuation of that, which is they learn how to live with the beast without having to tame it. They learn to like cooperatively live with it, right? And that's the thing. They haven't integrated it. They need to integrate the beast. Like, it needs to become so a part of your life. It's like I think of we don't need the cat on the leash right now. Like, we just don't. Cat's just like operating is fine. It knows what to do. It knows how to operate with us. It can be cute and playful on the podcast. Have a fun time. Like we're coherent with Kage right now.
There's no repression of them.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's like a sign of like we don't need to tame the beast right now. Like, the beast is fine. Like,
and you would also destroy my hand if you were to...
Yeah.
Like, how dare you repress me?
Yeah, right. Back to taming. Right? But, like, these are all the stages of life. None of them... And it's often like, oh, I have to get to the point where I'm integrating the beast. It's okay to just be at the point where you're looking at the beast. It's okay to be at the point where you're just taming the beast. It's okay. All that is okay. Be with where you're at. It's important to be with where you're at. If it's not the time to let the beast off the leash because that thing is going to go wild, keep the beast on the leash. But when it's time to let the beast off the leash and you've been keeping it on for too long, it's time to finally break through and find resolution. And find resolution and move past that and find coherence in a deeper level.
Dude, this is so good. There's an anime called Death Note, and it's so fire. But there's a character in it where he's doing this beautiful monologue, and he's talking about monsters. He's like, there's lying monsters, there's monsters that do X, Y, Z. And he's like, I probably wouldn't even recognize this monster sometimes as I am the monster as well too. And it's like being able to recognize like you are the beast as well too. When I'm referencing beast in this moment, I'm just referencing like the entity in which you need to look into and being able to dance between like recognition of it, taming it, and efforting to engage with it in a good way, integrating it, like all the different examples that Keith just said as well too. It's so important to just allow whatever phase you're engaging with the entity to just be.
And I'm gonna up the ante here. Are you ready for the next level?
I'm ready.
This is why they call me Brother What. Anyways, so the next step past this is typically people get to the end and they're like, cool, beast is off the leash. I got this. Cool. There's more after that. The more after that is learning to have the beast off the leash and be able to stare it at the eyes. Be able to have the beast off the leash and remember what it did when we were working on taming it. Right, at the same time, because it remembers the commands from the taming it. And what I'm like alluding to is like the like total integration of recognizing when we go through the 12 stages. Typically, the first time is like really novel, but we come back. there's never an end. This is a multi-dimensional, multi-dynamic. You're experiencing these stages in different ways, in different lives. We're complex human beings. Like, we're complex. Nature's wild, man. I think like nature's. I kind of think of it this way: nature's function is simplex. It's like on-off switch, and then like in betweens. But like its structures are very complex. Like the way it operates isn't that complicated, but the way it is very complicated.
You say also layered. Like I hear complicated, I hear layered.
Yeah.
Because I don't remember if it's Ram Dass or Sadhguru, where he's like, intelligence is simple, ego is complex.
Yeah, 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 100%. And so we have this like dual nature here going on, where like, oh, this is crazy, you know, type of thing. And so there's like things like I was just in it 2 days ago. Was like it's a familiar experience because I've experienced before, where you're in stage 12 and like 1 at the same time, and you're in suffering, and you're in like the most ecstatic like communal space, and it's so weird because you're just like, and whenever I experience it, the way I could describe it is it feels like you're weeping for God, and that's the experience. It's so intense. It's like, God, there's so many people in this world suffering, and I imagine what Siddhartha felt when he first like walked through the people, as he understood like the lowest of the lows and the highest of the highs occurring simultaneously.
I get that.
And it's like this cycle, and it's just like holding the intensity of suffering as well as like holding the biggest impact for the world at the same time, and they're both a part of life. So
as I've been in different states of consciousness, I get that. I feel that. That's where it's like, oh, that's where the tears of gratitude can come, and that's the
not having the beast on the leash, but staring it directly at the eyes. Like it's you're having that complexity of coming back to what you know to be the most intense and most like brutal aspects of being alive, and holding it and knowing that you can just let go and be like, yeah, everything's effortless, everything's fine, everything is exactly where it needs to be. There's a greater knowingness there. And it's like these two realities are just like merging. And these experiences of reality, they come like typically after we've experienced like the seasons really in depth of discover, and then transformation, and the season awaken. And it's like after we've kind of like really gotten a hold, we know how those shoes fit, and then we come back and it's like we start experiencing all these complexities. It's like a chef just learned how to make Chinese food, learned how to make Mexican food and Italian food, and then they're like, let's see what crazy combinations we can make between all of them. And then all of a sudden you got remember this place we went to in Dallas called Iota. It was a mixed Korean and Italian place, and they had kimchi carbonara. And oh my gosh, it was really good. But like it was like surprisingly everybody. It was funny because we were we were having a good time because all of the brothers were hanging out together. Me and my other brother got it, and they're like, and Quan looked at us. He's like, dude, that's gonna be coming up tomorrow, right? That's gonna be sliding right out tomorrow. We're like, everybody was like looking at us weird, but then we ate it and we're like, oh my God, this stuff's amazing. And it's a combination nobody expected, but was absolutely extraordinary. Like, and that's what happens is you get your red, your blue and yellow down, and then you start making periwinkle. So like, and then you're like, ooh, maybe if I just slightly tweak it a little bit, and you're like, ooh, that's really beautiful. And it just gets the color and the crisp that you need, and you get more attuned with reality. So.
Arts of life. Man, what and how can people connect to you socially?
Yeah, best way, you can access me on Instagram. I'm not a huge social media person, but I'm getting more into the game and exposing more, just because the more I talk like this, everybody's like, oh my gosh, you need to talk more about this. I'm like, okay, fine. Yeah. So Instagram's a great place to find me. Another thing is my website, limitlesschiropractic.org. You're welcome. I always do free consults with people. I think health information is a human right. So if you want to hop on a call with me and like be like, how do I figure out my energetic blueprint? I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to like hook that up and help you out and help kind of just give some tips and tricks of like, how do I apply this to my life, and how do I utilize this right now? Nice. And sometimes it's a lot simpler than you'd think. And I've had multiple people where just in our initial like exam, like I've talked to people and people are like, I've seen this one oftentimes. They'll go to a psychologist and they're like, oh, it's not working for me. And I feel wrong because everybody told them, hey, go to the therapist, go to the therapist, go to the therapist. And they go there and it's not working. And I'm like, you're drained in perception. Like you get no energy by going into feeling. Stop going into feeling. And they just like, I always see there's so much relief comes over them. Like, oh, because it's like society's been telling them this is how to do this thing and it's not working for them. And then somebody finally comes in and says, no, stop doing that. That's dumb. Stop listening to other people. Like that's not how you operate, type of thing. And I tell them why it is. That doesn't mean they don't need to go see a therapist. It's just the particular way they approach it is typically like past like all people who are external and drained in perception. And I think we've talked about this before, which just basically means they really shouldn't be talking about the past context in a feeling manner. That is the worst thing they could do because their energy just goes whoop and it tanks. And they'll just be in tears and they'll feel like crud. And oftentimes people see tears and they're like, cool, they're emotionally processing. And sometimes I see tears and I'm like, that's not good. They're breaking down, they're closing down to reality, and they're actually like trying to manage their energy. And so just because we see tears doesn't mean it's a good or bad thing. It's just like, what's the situation, what's going on type of thing. So, yeah.
Specificity. Man, last question for you.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Stage 6.
Transform?
Yeah.
Man, if you were to describe your flavor of soul coffee to
gosh.
the world, how would you describe it?
I think we talked about this before. It reminds me, I love this guy's music. Jakub Zatecki. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He's Polish, so I'll get the pronunciation right. I remember the first time I was talking to John about this. Is like the first time I listened to his music, my brain just went like, what? It was like I wasn't using my ears anymore. My whole body got like involved in it. It felt like my soul got tapped. And like this is like the transition between like this isn't music anymore. This is freaking art. Like, ooh, type of thing. This is like, oh, we're going in a different dimension here, and like that's really what I want anybody listening to this to get away from this is like when they tap into me, they get a main line of limitless. They feel unbound. They feel like anything is possible. They feel unbound by their body. And so they feel so like engorged and filled up with the passion that it's like they forget that they're listening to a podcast. They forget that they're listening to a human talking, and they get so involved in like lifing that they start lifing really like it just starts becoming an expanding thing so much greater. Yeah.
I love that. I'll push you.
Want the soul to just.
Was that like as a beverage?
Oh, I like what's the taste?
Yep.
What's the taste?
Give some profiles.
Some profiles. It's like its own flavor profile. So like you're like taste it and you're like, I can't even compare this to anything. It's only in its own category, and there's something like light, airy about it.
There you go.
Opening.
Yep.
It's like almost like puts you on a cloud.
Nice.
Kind of like floats around and it makes you like back to being carefree, and it makes you feel like a kid again.
Nice. Limitless latte, everybody. Beautiful. Well, y'all, it's been lovely to have y'all back again. I'm so grateful for Lou for recording this podcast and getting it up. It feels always great to collaborate with him whenever it opens up. I'm really excited for this year. Please tap into Dr. Keith, my brother, as well, too. If you resonated with this, if this shit was fire, share it with somebody. Please share it with somebody. Leave a 5-star review, as I'm excited to go off with Soul Coffee this year. And I'm also going to put a link into my own practice as well. I'm Masana Chiropractic Studio, as I'm going to be opening up my doors January 20th, as well as I have a school community now, providing for the providers. So for my people that weren't able to experience that in person, tap into me on school. I'll put that link as well into the show notes, as I'm excited to blow that thing up as well, too, as it's going to be a space online for exhausted healthcare professionals where we're going to be doing online live Q&A. There's going to be guests. There's going to be bonuses. There's going to be a lot of good stuff. So until next time, y'all. Peace.